In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can take more control over your Midjourney videos by using their image editor. So the Midjourney video engine works by taking an image and converting it into a video. You have start frames, you have end frames, and so by using the editor, we can take more control over the framing of your video, not only at the start, but also at the end. This can help us to improve things like camera motion, set up different camera angles, and then of course we can also use certain consistency tools to create a sequence of videos to edit together and maybe even tell a small story. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can use these tools today and to get results like that for your projects. Now, Midjourney have also released a few updates to their video tool, so I'm going to touch on those quickly, as well as touching on how we can start to frame up some of the shots that we want to get in Midjourney by first looking at our prompt, and then we're going to move on to using the editor to take more control over how those shots are framed. So first, a few of the updates. If we have an image open, we're going to turn it into a video. If we come down to animate image, we can create a looping video here in either low or high motion, or just a normal video in auto or high motion, or we can animate manually. If I click animate manually, we come up, we have a start frame. We can also add an ending frame or turn on looping and choose between low or high motion. But on top of that, if I click on this button here, we can now also use HD, which is like a 720p video or around that resolution, instead of SD. And instead of using up a whole bunch of our credits, we can go from batches of 4 videos down to 2 or even 1. Because HD is pretty expensive and you can't use relax mode. So using smaller batch sizes may be useful for using HD. So if I create, say, 2 videos, HD, and I just simply type in a prompt like zooming through a giant gate, and I send that on, and you notice here we have 2 videos instead of 4 because our batch size was 2, and they're in HD, which is 720p, so it produces pretty decent videos. Now with this video, you'll notice I'm zooming through this gate, and of course the prompt says zooming through a giant gate. So obviously describing the camera movement helps us to control the shot. I'm going to jump into some examples to help you to learn how to start with a good prompt to try and get the result you're after. And a couple of easy methods for this is to describe the type of shot, the camera movement, and also the speed of the camera movement, although it's not exactly guaranteed. So I have this image I generated in Midjourney, and what we're going to do is start to work with zoom. So we have here the camera zooms in slowly at the end of the prompt, and we get a pretty reliable result, as well as a shot of a woman smiling. Camera zooms out slowly, and zooming in or out is pretty reliable. But zooms out quickly to a full body shot didn't quite get there, so I tried to extend it, because we may need to extend our videos to finish off the action, but this time around it didn't work. But by describing what you want to zoom to and things you want to show in the scene, such as the high heels and white pants and the fact she's smiling, it will try to get the smile and the heels into the image by describing them in the prompt. So you may need to take the time to build a working prompt. So you want to start with the shot type, so whether it's a close-up, full body shot, that kind of thing, to describe the framing. You want to describe the camera movement and speed, so it zooms in slowly, pans to one side quickly, or you want to describe where you want to zoom or move to. So this means you can describe where the shot should end, whether it's a close-up shot or a full body shot, that kind of thing. But also, if you're having trouble, describe the elements you want to see. So it could be a hat, hair, or the type of shoes the person is wearing. And that way, if you include those things in the prompt, Midjourney will try to actually render them in the image, forcing it to kind of zoom out a little bit. But this starts to fall apart when I try to pan. Even when I put pans left with this shot, the woman just kind of sits there. I don't get any camera movement with the low angle. She just kind of looks down. The high angle doesn't really work either. But I do have a solution that I'm going to share much later in the video with you. So I thought I'd try a completely different shot. And again, I just don't seem to get any results that match my prompt, regardless of what I try here. Zoom seems to work well, but these other shots, not so much. So if there's one weakness I find with Midjourney's video tool, is that it is very hard to describe shots a lot of the time. Sometimes you get exactly what you want, but other times it seems almost impossible to get the framing or the movement that you want. So this is where we need to turn to the editor to make this happen. Now, a common complaint is being able to get a static shot where the camera doesn't move. I have a few little tips here that can help you to make that happen. Now, before we dive into the actual editor, this quick little tip might help you get what you need if you have a simple shot in mind, because this particular image, it seems to want to keep zooming in. But if I decide to come down here and animate manually, I can try to just simply loop the video. And because what it essentially does is adds the start frame as an end frame, then the camera movement should not move too much. And if I change the prompt to say something like, I have a still static shot of people walking around town, I recommend mentioning that you want a still static shot right at the start of the prompt, and you want to prompt for as little movement as possible. Unfortunately, that seems to be what works best There's no guarantees. This only improves your odds, but it does help when you're trying to nail it down. With a few tries, hopefully you can get what you're after. Midjourney seems to be notorious at still static shots, but also the motion. If it's set to high, it's going to try to do more with the video, so we make sure we set that to low. So we've mentioned a still static shot. We have looped it so that the end frame is the same as the start frame. Low motion, I submit, and the camera doesn't move. However, the movement within the shot is a bit weird. This is perhaps a better example of how to use this where there's not so much movement. But coming back, how do we fix this weird movement now that we have the camera still? Coming back to our image. So one of the problems was that from the start frame to the end frame, nothing actually moves, but we're expecting movement in between. So this is where the editor comes in. The first thing we're going to do is right click and copy the image URL. But then I'm going to head in to edit. But in order to get a bit more control, I want to use layers. So I'll go open in the edit tab. And from here, what I can start to do is I can start to regenerate some areas of the scene. So if I decided to get my brush size, I can go through, remove some of these people and regenerate them. Also in some of the blank areas, I will fill those in. So I've removed some people, I've left one person standing there for reference. And I'm just going to type in the same prompt from the image, which was Victorian era futurism, submit the edit, and I can go through and choose which option I think is going to look the best. I like the fact there's someone new here. Now I'll reintroduce some people over here. I say people walking. And now I've added some people in there. But what if I want to do things like move the blimp or even this trailer here? What I'm actually going to do, first of all, is I'm actually just going to wipe out this section completely. And I'm also going to remove the blimp itself. So now what I need to do is add this back in as a layer. So I come down here to layers, click add from URL. I paste in the URL that I copied, hit OK. And now the image is back. So I'm going to start with the blimp alone. So what I'm going to do is go to Smart Select and select the blimp itself, piece by piece. I've selected most of it. There's a few pieces missing, but if I erase the background, I now have a blimp that I can move. I can take this, shrink it a tiny bit. I can even move it over near the building, so it's kind of moved across. And then I'm going to grab my paint tool and just erase a section of the blimp itself. But then I need to go back to my bottom layer and just create a bit of space around it for that blimp to blend in. So it will generate the details around it. Now I do the same process again to add another layer. And by pasting that same layer in again, I'm going to do the same process for the little cart that is in the middle of the scene as well. And again, I can take that cart, I can't really enlarge it, but I can shrink it and kind of move it in a little bit. And I've already got some space for it all to blend in. So now, if I remove this prompt and type in basically the same prompt as the original image, I submit that edit, and it has unfortunately added to the blimp. So we need to go back to our original setup here. And one thing I'm going to do is I need the blimp to be on its own. So I'm actually going to make sure I select the blimp layer down here. And where it says paint, I'm going to go to restore. And I just need to restore some of the cloud work around the blimp so that it blends in better. Now there's going to be some areas that I need to fix up. For instance, this part down here, I need to actually go back to the bottom layer and I just need to touch this up so that I'm removing the right areas and keeping what I want. So now I've edited this into place. I can submit my edit again and I'll come up with a frame here, which is framed the same as our original shot. However, some of the items in it have moved. Now this is a bit of a complex example, but it shows just the way you can use this tool to create an end frame. So now if I upscale to gallery, we now have a suitable end frame. So if I go into our video here, I can just use the same prompt, but I'm going to come up here, go to the image, so we can go through the process. I'm going to go animate manually. I'm going to type in a prompt, a still static shot of people walking around town. So similar to before, motion is on low, but I head out and drag our end frame in. And from the preview alone, we can see that the blimp has moved and things are a little bit different. So now when I submit, then what we get is this, which has some very slight movement. It's pretty close. So I tried a few adjustments and reprompting and got this with a revised prompt, which I think does the job pretty well. And of course, if we're using the editor, there's more we can do than just simply reframe and change things. We can remove objects or add objects and use that as our end frame to create motion within the video. Now, if you're looking for more Midjourney resources, I've recently released a mood board pack. For $12.99 is the current price. You get 100 mood boards that you can apply to your images, and they get some pretty unique results. But also, I have my style pack with 1,000 Midjourney styles that you can add to your prompts, along with my complete comprehensive Midjourney video course. So, if you're looking for a little extra information or extra tools for Midjourney, check out my website. There's a link in the description below. You can have a look at these for yourself and see if they interest you. Now, back to the video. So now you understand the basic concept of how this works. How can we use it to build a complete sequence? I'm going to run through and show you how we can frame up a series of different images, use some of the consistency tools, and we're going to create a sequence of videos that is going to be edited together. And that way you can start to use this to create not just single one-shot 5-second videos, but create full sort of edited videos or stories using Midjourney. So I'm going to take this as our start frame for the video, and I want to get a bit more of a unique camera movement from it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep this on hand, but I'm going to come down here to edit to head into the editor. And from there, I can shrink this if I really want to. I can move it off to the side. And I might even add something into the scene a little bit, sort of by erasing this part here. So we have our guy here, we have the background. And I'm going to just come up the top here and type in, I have a clown, looks at a man in a business suit to try and add that clown in there. I submit the edit. So we end up with these 4 images here. So now if I want to use one of these as an end frame, we'll say this one here. I can come to our start frame down the bottom. I'm going to animate manually, exit out. And then I'm going to grab this frame here and I'll drag it up into the ending frame. So you can see how by taking the image we want to work with and editing it up to create an end frame, we managed to keep a lot of the same elements in both images, but we're able to move the camera sort of around and get better framing for that second image and kind of link the two together with the video. This is a really just a nice, simple, easy way to think about changing camera angles in a shot, but having more control where the camera lands. So now we have a start frame and an ending frame, and there's a lot of similarities that the AI video can draw from. I'm going to take this prompt, type in, a man in a business suit is walking downtown, the camera moves over to show a clown staring at him. Now, I could go and try motion low, but I feel like there's probably a decent amount of movement in this, so I'm going to go with motion high. And I can also check that I want to use HD or SD. I can also add, instead of 4 videos, we can try 2. So I'm going to run with the 4 videos so we can check out what results we can actually have available to us. I'm going to submit, and from that, we get these 4 videos where he walks past the clown. Now, some of them are a bit strange, so we want to choose the best video, and I think this one here gets us the best result. Now, there is one issue, and that is that at the end of the shot, the guy walks forward and then starts to take a step backwards. Now, we could just chop that off if we're going to edit it in an editor to create a larger scene, but let's see if we can fix or at least minimize it so we can use more of this video. So what I'm going to do is come back to this original image, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a simple 2x upscale. This is an older image, so I'm going to use a 2x upscale. And now we have a much larger version of that image. I'm going to download it to my computer. Then I'm going to come back to this image here. I'm going to come down to edit, and I'm going to go straight into the edit tab so we have access to layers. So we have our image here, and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my eraser to erase this guy completely from the image. Now, the next step is actually to import the image we enlarged of the man originally, but we can't actually increase the size of him within the canvas. So we need to crop it using an external tool. So that way, when we bring him in, we can make him a bit larger so that he appears closer to the camera. And I'm going to head over to Google, search for the Adobe Image Cropper, head there, drag in the image I just upscaled. And because he's walking to the camera, we need to make him larger, and we need to figure out what we're going to cut off. So I'm going to basically crop into his midsection a bit so he can be a bit bigger, leaving space around him for the hair. I'm going to download. Then back in the editor, I'm going to drag over my cropped image, and he's now much larger in the frame. And from here, because this layer is above the other layer with the clown in it, I'm going to go to Smart Select and select him piece by piece. And I'm going to erase the background. But on top of that, I need to create some space around him on the second layer at the bottom for him to blend in. So I grab the paint and I just create a little bit of space around him to blend him in. From there, I just say, man downtown next to a clown. We've got enough information here for it to work on. I submit that edit, choose the image I think works best, like this one here. And now I can upscale the gallery, And when I head back to create, now we have an image of him closer to the camera with the clown looking at him. So if I come back to our original video, we can repeat the process, but we've already done it once, so I'm just going to click use prompt. But this time, instead of this end frame, I'm going to remove that, drag in our new end frame. I submit. So now we have these videos here. And he still looks back just a little bit. It's just not as bad as it was. Now, I could simply just pop this into an editor and trim the end off like I mentioned earlier. However, I feel like maybe he's walking a little too fast, so maybe I can adjust the prompt to get him to walk a little bit more slowly, just to give that final tweak. And like I said, you just have to make these adjustments sometimes when you're using AI in order to get the result that you're after. So I'm going to come back over here and click use. And where it says the man in the business suit is walking, I'm going to say he is walking slowly downtown. And I submit again. As you can see, we've managed to improve it a little bit, but again, we'd still have to trim a little bit off the end. But overall, I think the control here is pretty solid, and I'm happy to work with that as it is. So if we want to start building a sequence of shots here by changing shots and angles, I want to start working on something different. Maybe we want to zoom in on the clown this time in order to just have a little bit of a break back and forth so we can use these shots as part of a sequence that kind of tells a little bit of a story. Coming back to this image here, if I download this image, I take it back to the same image cropper, and because this was an upscale, we can get away with just simply zooming in like this. But if you don't think the resolution is good enough, we're going to download this, and coming back into Midjourney, I can go and edit a new photo, but I want to keep the exact same aspect ratio, so I'm going to come down here to edit, and then once you're in, open in the edit tab, and then I'm going to drag in our cropped clown image, position it on the page, and I'm going to delete the layer underneath. Now, he has a bit of shoulder here. I think I'd actually like to get rid of that. So I do need to make some kind of small edit. If you don't want to actually edit the image itself, what you can do is go to Paint with your eraser, make it nice and small, and just pop a little part out in the corner up here. But because we're going to remove the shoulder, I am going to remove it all together. And I'm going to type in a real basic prompt like a clown, since we don't really have much info to add in there. So if you need to add in more information, you need to get a bit more detail in your prompt. But I submit that edit, and I think that image looks pretty good. Upscale to gallery. And now that's been upscaled, I can click on it. I can go to animate manually, and even say a clown smiles in a creepy way. And if I wanted to edit it back so that it lands and I can use it with the other shot, I'm actually going to loop it so he comes back to this facial expression. But this is totally optional, because what I'm going to do is go back to the other shot and continue it from there. But I've got this image here. He smiles in a creepy way. I send that on. Now we have these videos of the clown looking nice and creepy. So you can see, by having a base image to start with, there are certain ways you can kind of crop and chop things up in order to create some consistent shots to put together and take control of those angles. So what we're going to do is continue on from there, add more to this sequence so that we can start to put something together. Now I've used this frame as an end shot on the video we created earlier. However, I want to use it as a start frame for our next video and then create some edits for it to end on. So we just need to come back and find that shot in the feed. Now this one was created using the editor, so I can't just go into edit. It's actually quite a bit of stuffing around. But because we already edited it, I can come over here to edit, and I can see it over here, and I can pick up where we left off. For one, we want to remove this guy so he's turning and facing the clown. And just keep in mind, whatever path you need to do to get to this main editor, you'll be able to get the same results. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to delete this layer so he is removed, and remove some of this. Then what I'm going to do is leave that open. And as long as I have 6.1 selected, in this instance, we can't use 7, but we can use 6.1. What I'm going to do is come over here to my image prompt, and I've still got this guy from when I uploaded him before. I could upload him again if it wasn't there, but I'm going to take this image, I'm going to drag it up into character references, and I'm going to type in a prompt. I have a man is turned facing a clown. I submit. Now we've got a few different options here. I think this one looks pretty good, but also the clown's face hasn't changed at all. So what we can do this time is remove this character reference. We still have our crop, so I'll put this character reference in here instead. And I'm going to just take my brush size down, remove the mouth area of his face. And I'm going to say, clown is smiling at a man. To replace the look on his face, submit. Find the creepiest one here. This one looks nice and creepy. I think we'll stick with that. So now I have this one, I can upscale to gallery again, and now we have that image upscaled. But before we go any further, we should come back down because we want to continue the video from here. So I'm going to click on this, animate manually, head back to create, and this time we can drag this image as our ending frame. And I type in a prompt. A man turns around to confront a creepy clown. I'm going to keep the motion low this time to see what results I get. I submit. And now we have the video, and he's turning to the creepy clown, and the clown's doing some creepy facial expressions. So by using the editor to edit an existing image, or also introducing character consistency to change what a character does within an image, the editor allows us to make changes in the frames that we're using in the video, also to change the way that the actual video is framed in the first place, or even the end frame. So it's a really powerful tool, and now we've got 3 consecutive shots that can basically run together. But we don't have to just keep creating new shots. We can also experiment with the extend tool as well. So we're going to keep going with this process. But don't forget, we have some of these other tools available to us. So if I click on this video and go to extend manually, instead of having the man turns around to confront a creepy clown, we can say, we have a clown turns and runs away quickly. The man in the business suit stands looking confused. So of course we can change actions by using extensions and then add on to that narrative as well. So when I submit that, and out of our 4 videos, a lot of these didn't work, but we do have 1 successful one in the top right-hand corner. Now, another thing we can do with a similar process is actually to change the angle of the shot, because I find prompting for the angle to be very difficult. This is a lot easier, but it's still actually quite difficult to do. But I'll show you the process that I use. So I have this guy here, and I want a high angle shot of him sort of walking down the street. So if for one, I'm going to make sure I'm actually using version 7 this time around, and I'm going to drag him up as an Omni reference. And then I come up the top, I type in a simple prompt. So I've written here a high angle shot of a man in a business suit looking ahead, standing on concrete sidewalk. Road on the left, shops on the right. It's not always going to get this perfect, but it's definitely worth trying. And just remember, you may need to re-roll, retry, and experiment with the Omni strength. I'm going to keep it at the default of 100, and I'm going to submit. So now we have these 4 shots here. However, the angle still isn't quite what I'm after. It's tried to match the Omni reference a little too closely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to experiment by changing the prompt around a little bit and maybe adjusting the Omni reference. So I'm going to come up to use to bring this back up, and I'm going to go into my Omni strength and bring it down to about 75. And by reducing the Omni strength or the Omni weight, it allows us to still reference our image of the man, but it just gives us a little more flexibility to not be so tied to it and exacting in the way that it references it. I'm also going to change this prompt a little bit as well. I have a high angle shot looking down on a man in a business suit. So that way, by looking down and describing what we want to see in the shot, it gives Midjourney a better reference to kind of work with. Now, this may take a few reruns, a few adjustments. It can be a lot of back and forth. I find adjusting the angle of a shot, even with an Omni reference, is kind of difficult, but you can get there as long as you play with these factors, especially dialing the Omni reference down to focus more on your prompt, but turning it off completely can make your character look a little too different. So finding that balance can be a bit tough. But I've managed to come up with these images here, which I think most of them are pretty useful. Most of them have him walking, and this one is kind of standing. I really like just the way this particular shot looks, but it doesn't match the rest of the videos we took. This one seems to be about the closest, so I'm going to run with that. So now we come back to the video that we created earlier, because we're going to extend and try and get the camera to lift up and look down upon our character. So this is the video that we managed to create. I'm going to come down to extend manually. Then I'm going to head back to create, take this and drag it up into our ending frame. And again, I need to adjust the prompt so it better reflects what we're looking for. I have the camera pans up into a high shot looking down on a man looking ahead into the distance. Now, he does have the action of walking, but I feel like if I describe that he's going to be walking, that he may start walking too early. So I'm going to leave that out and just kind of let Midjourney interpret that as it wants from the image. But also, even though the camera moves a fair bit, I'm going to try low as well as high, because I want to see which variation of this is going to get the best result. So I submit the low, use, and submit the high. So now we have the motion low shot, and there is some funny footwork going on there, kind of like he's breakdancing. Move up to motion high, and we still get some funny footwork. Now, after a quick adjustment, I was able to get this video here, which I think is the most natural, where the clown runs off and the guy just starts to walk as the camera pulls up. Now, there are a few duds in here, so it did take, I think it was two re-rolls and the one adjustment to sort of get this result. So you need to be a bit patient and kind of work with it, because AI video is just, it can be a bit tough, but this just gives us a bit more control to try and nail down the parameters of what we're trying to create. But you'll notice I had to add in here, looking down on a man standing still, looking ahead. Otherwise, you kind of do that weird breakdancey thing. But overall, I think this works pretty well. So now, if we add that into our video, so we have our guy walking, the original shot from earlier, cutting to the clown, and then of course, cutting back to our guy who's turning and talking to the clown before he runs off. And I find that the camera action here is a bit rapid, but it's only a small period of time to have such a drastic angle. So overall, this worked pretty well, I believe. Now, editing these together is actually pretty simple. You can download a simple tool like CapCut and just import the clips onto a timeline, and you can even trim them a little bit quite easily and create a video sequence just like the one we did, and it's actually pretty simple and doesn't take much time to do. So hopefully that's helped you to better understand how you can actually use the Midjourney image editor to create better videos on Midjourney. The fact that the two work well together, the image and the videos, means that if you start to think across both mediums, you'll have a lot more control in the long run. But also, I have a whole bunch of more Midjourney video tips that I think you should check out. If this interests you, I'll pop a card on the screen right now. But otherwise, that's the video for today, guys. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider giving the video a like. Otherwise, I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.